Our first question. Is this too loud? Is this good? Okay. The State Agency on Aging seems to be lost in state government. Where is it? The State Agency on Aging seems to be lost in state government. Where is it? Mr. Aziere, would you start, please?
Senior citizens are a priority to this community because so many people in this community are senior citizens, and that includes me because I'm 69 years old. We have not addressed our senior citizens responsively in the last probably 4 or 5 years. And they have great needs. They have great needs in health care. They have great needs in trying to meet their income. We have not had responsive government in the state of Missouri to introduce bills that will effectively meet the needs of our seniors. If I'm elected, that it would be one of my priorities.
Mr. McDonald.
Over the last 10 years, I think the senior services for the state of Missouri, is true, it has been lost inside state government. Benefits and services for seniors have declined. I think in the last 5 of those years, the issues for seniors have come to the forefront, and a lot of good things have happened to help seniors with some of the issues that face them in their later years. You know, one of the biggest ones is keeping seniors in their home, and their declining years. They want to stay there. And there's been a lot of good legislation that will help relieve some of the tax burden on seniors, some of the health care issues that are important to seniors and are part of state government. Medicaid is obviously, Medicare are important to them. And the last 4 or 5 years, there's been really progressive and little far-reaching legislation that help them become more important. That's the end of the line.
Question number 2. What will you do in the House to break the left/right roadblocks we have seen recently? What will you do in the House to break the left/right roadblocks we have seen recently? Mr. McDonald, would you start, please?
Well, it's true that on both the state level and the national level has become highly partisan. And there's one effective way to get away from that, and that is go around the partisanship and create relationships that on a personal basis rather than a partisan basis is the only way that I think you can eliminate the hard partisan line inside the State House. It can be done. I have a lot of good friends on the opposite side of the aisle that I consider friends on a social level. I think that's important. With the onset of term limits 10 years ago, what was considered a gray line as far as that line down the middle of the aisle and the partisan division is now a hard black line, and nobody wants to cross that line because there's no time. 8 years is in, you're in and out. It's hardly enough time. And that's the end of my time.
You may always finish a sentence.
People just don't feel that there is a comfortable spot in that amount of time to develop those relationships. So it's unfortunate term limits have established that hard line.
Mr. Aziere?
My opponent is running as the Democrat. I am not running as the Republican. I'm running as a Republican, but for the people of Raytown. I am not partisan. I'm running for this area to solve the problems that I think have a priority. If I am fortunate enough to be in Jefferson City, it's not about partisan politics for me. It's about solving the problems that we need in the state of Missouri. I will welcome anybody, Republican or Democrat, who will join me in helping bring about safe neighborhoods, good schools, keep people working. It's the issues that count. What we really need to solve problems in this country are politicians who are statesmen, politicians who are willing to work with whoever wants to solve problems to meet the needs of the state of Missouri.
Question number 3. The Missouri Department of Mental Health funding has been cut in the past few years. If elected, will you support increased funding for Department of Mental Health? The Missouri Department of Mental Health funding has been cut in the past few years. If elected, will you support increased funding for Department of Mental Health? Mr. McDonald, will you start, please?
Well, it is true that the Department of Mental Health has suffered considerable cuts over the last few years. Unfortunately, they're a soft target. And with budget considerations, with all of the things that are coming into play, everyone is being asked to give. But there are certain agencies that really are soft and easy to take advantage of. And Department of Mental Health is obviously one of the easiest ones. I'm running on a social platform. My party believes that social programs, should be held up and not attacked. And it's just a hard thing to fend off. But the truth is, Department of Mental Health is one of the softer targets when it comes to budget cuts, and they're the ones that suffer. So over the last couple of years, it's been a little more to the forefront when it comes to knowing who's. Thank you.
Mr. Aziere?
The economy and the state of this country has dictated the fact that almost every program has had drops. I know that firsthand as an alderman in this city. We've had to deal with some very tough decisions on cutting budgets. Every program in Jefferson City has taken a hit. I don't think that one is more important than the other. We all have those programs that we think are sacred to us. Education is sacred to me. But I don't think it's any more important than mental health care in this state. The fact is that when you have to balance the budget and you don't have the money to balance it and add programs or add 2 programs, everybody takes the hit equally. I do not believe that we need to raise taxes in a time when the people are already hurting to pay their own bills. Many of those bills are utility bills. So unfortunately, I see unless the economy of this country improves and our budgets improve, there likely will not be an increase in very many programs.
Question number 4. What is your position on campaign finance reform here in Missouri? What is your position on campaign finance reform here in Missouri? Mr. Aziere, will you start, please?
There was an attempt for a campaign finance reform, and I wished it would have passed. Quite frankly, I do believe that the budgets of many candidates are bloated and gorged with the funds that come from big businesses, and the control of money into campaign funds or funding for particular candidates that they want to see get elected. This is a democracy by which everybody should have equal opportunity to run for office and represent their community. I do believe, and I would support, not just campaign funding, but significant campaign funding that would not just limit how much money, but the gifts along with that are given to many of these politicians after they're elected.
Mr. McDonald?
3 years ago, limits on campaign contributions were abolished. That opened the door for major PACs, super PACs to come in, fund political campaigns without any limitation, and really kind of control how parties and campaigns and elections are run and have been affected. Over those last 3 years, we've proposed return to ethics reform campaign contribution laws. It's important that we balance it back so that the playing field is level. I can tell you from firsthand experience that the funding is so out of control that special interests really now control the success or failure of most major campaigns.
Question number 5. Do you favor a statewide smoking ban in public places? Do you favor a statewide smoking ban in public places? Mr. Aziere, would you begin, please?
The answer is yes. I introduced the smoking ban for the city of Raytown, and that was after this city did a survey that showed that 70% of the people in Raytown wanted to be able to go to establishments that were smoke-free. Since that time, we had a bowling alley go out of business. We also will be losing another major business in Raytown in November, primarily because it's not smoke-free. I think ultimately it's not just about the economy, it's about the health of the people who choose to go out to dinner, to bowl, and to be in public places, not just for them, but also for their families.
Mr. McDonald?
Well, I've always favored statewide limitation or a ban on smoking. I just think it makes it fair for every community. The businesses inside of the community suffer. Raytown has a smoking law, and neighboring communities do not. Business travels across city line, people who smoke. The healthiest and the most legitimate way to, first of all, save that revenue and save businesses within communities that do ban smoking is to impose a statewide ban. It's so popular in every other state but ours, it seems like a natural, but we've had a lot of trouble getting it to move forward.
Question number 6. Give an example of how you work across the aisle to achieve successful legislation. Give an example of how you would work across the aisle to achieve successful legislation. Mr. McDonald.
Well, first off, if you want to be successful in any way in Jefferson City, the truth is you have to be able to work across the aisle. To pass any law or to create any law, to pass any legislation, it really is a bipartisan effort. And so the idea of ever accomplishing anything, being hard partisan in that business, is just out of the question. You have to be able to convince people that your ideas are good ones. You have to be able to talk across the aisle. It's in the state capitol right now, the balance is pretty lopsided. There's 106 to the opposing party in comparison to 58 in mine. And if you're ever going to move a piece of legislation, first, it has to be good legislation, and it has to be understandable legislation, and you have to garner support on the other side of the aisle, or it's out of the question.
Mr. Aziere?
I think we need to be realistic. First of all, I've read the rules for the State House of Representatives, for the rules of order. Those rules in some ways disenfranchise the minority party. Most of the debate in Jefferson City takes place in caucus, not really on the House floor. I've actually seen cases where Republicans are debating and the Democrats are not there, and vice versa. The Democrats start to debate and Republicans go back to their office. I think the only time that we truly see people working across the aisle is if there are two people that have a similar interest that maybe tend to be generic. Sometimes those are issues that deal with a particular community. They are not controversial issues usually, but more generic. I think this is probably one of the downfalls of both national and state politics, why we don't solve our problems. I think it's a critical issue. The first way to achieve that is to stop being partisan.
Question number 7. Both candidates are in elected positions. What specific instances can you point to where you created business and job opportunities in Raytown? What specific instances can you point to where you created business and job opportunities in Raytown? Mr. McDonald, will you begin, please?
Well, some of the local legislation that we've worked on for the city of Raytown, we've been successful in certain areas. I think we've reduced some of the utility costs for the city of Raytown. That would have a reaching implication for business interest. I mean, you know, if you can drive down utility costs, you can certainly attract business to your community. The ability to garner economic development needs certain components, and we worked on some legislation a few years ago that would allow the outreach to some major corporations to happen. One of the biggest things that's happened over the last year is the creation of land assemblage. I think that's really important to a community like Raytown. It's a great opportunity. Raytown is really in a great location.
Mr. Aziere?
Well, I have been part of an economic team that has worked to redevelop Raytown. Economic redevelopment is our #1 priority. In the last 2 years, we've either expanded or added 70 new businesses in this city. But I think probably the thing that I have done personally to support business is that for the last 42 years, I shop in Raytown. It's where I live. When I bought the sign for my campaign, I bought them at a local place called Evan Advertising. When my opponent bought his signs, he went to Lee Summit and spent, over $3,000 for signs. That's what creating business is all about. Shopping in your community, and this is my community.